Hello, and welcome to LoreDive, where we delve into the backstories of some of the greatest video games out there. Today we are skipping forward a bit to Dead by Daylight's 31st chapter, All Things Wicked, with its new realm, the Greenville Square, its new survivor, Sable Ward, and its new killer, the Unknown. Withered Isle, Greenville Square, a thin slice of small-town Americana, long abandoned, long forgotten. Greenville was always meant to be a place for those who felt like they didn't belong, a town founded by pilgrims fleeing persecution. Those pilgrims still watch over the environment, their fierce determination lovingly portrayed in a statue that stands tall in the center of town. Such a tormented place is perfect for the Withered Isle, a realm made for the dark and the forgotten. Now in the entity's realm, something wanders freely along the overgrown streets, a writhing creature responsible for a string of disappearances across the country, going back decades. Even the local cinema, a hub of fantasy and escapism, provides no sanctuary from the evil that will never die. Survivor. Sable Ward. Sable figured she had to be adopted. No way was she the progeny of her instantly perky mom and her grinning golf-playing frat boy of a dad. They didn't understand the first thing about her. No one in Greenville did, except for Michaela. They were fast friends since the 3rd grade. Up until then, Sable had no friends. She wasn't into ponies or dolls or tea parties with teddy bears. She liked bugs, lizards, riding bikes, and dirt-clawed fights. Her favorite holiday was Halloween, and Michaela was the only one who didn't think she was crazy when she dyed her hair purple in the 8th grade. Sable's mom was furious. Her dad didn't even notice. Michaela went with her to the mall when she got her ears pierced and helped her pick out her first tattoo, an occult symbol hidden in a place her parents would never see. Michaela declined to get her own tattoo. She flirted with the dark side, but she didn't live in it. Not like Sable. The dark side made sense to Sable, and she reveled in it. Partly because it freaked out her parents and teachers, partly because it felt like who she was. Some called her a goth because of the way she presented herself, but she wasn't into labels. She loved horror movies and found the occult exciting. It made sense to her. She knew that the shiny suburban world of her mom and dad had a dark underbelly. They were afraid to confront their fear, so they pretended that everything was perfect, and that they would live forever. But Sable knew better. Death stalks us all, and no one is getting out alive. Michaela got Sable a job at Moonstone, probably the only place in town that would have hired her. She took classes at the local college and produced a guerrilla radio show on the shortwave in her attic. All Things Wicked this night was about the world's dark underbelly, the occult, urban legends, horror, and often there were heated discussions with Michaela about the horror movies they'd catch at the only theater in Greenville. Michaela liked her horror with a little comedy, but Sable liked it meaner, scarier, bloodier. She relished the gore, enjoyed the terror, liked to feel the adrenaline rush, and their debates were entertaining, to say the least. When searching for inspiration for her show, Sable would take walks in the cemetery with all the statues and headstones of early settlers who founded the town as a sanctuary for escaping persecution. She often talked about that history on her show, and she formed a theory that the uncanny sightings and disappearances were somehow linked to the town's past. One caller suggested the town was built on top of a fracture. The caller went on to describe a fracture as an overlap between worlds. Another caller said these fractures were created by an ancient cult devoted to forgotten demons. Another caller defined fractures as a comic buffet for an elder god that fed on pain, fear, and misery. And one caller even argued that it wasn't a fracture, but the unknown, a mysterious creature that consumed anyone who dared to imagine it. All the theories made for fun and inspiring debates, and she loved nothing more than to discuss real-life horror, until the horror became personal. One evening, Sable had challenged Michaela to tell a real horror story at Moonstone's annual Halloween festival. Scare the crap out of people. Stop dancing around the horror and embrace it. Tell a story about the unknown. Make them imagine it. Make them believe the unknown will show up on stage. Nothing terrifies an audience more than a show that could potentially kill them. Michaela laughed at the idea and declined the challenge because she was working on another story with her roommate. But a strange black fog had taken Michaela during her performance, and Sable felt the icy hand of guilt grab her by the back of her neck. She was convinced that she had somehow sent Michaela to her doom. Did the unknown take her? Did she try to define the unknown? What about her roommate? Her roommate disappeared as well. But then she realized Michaela's story wasn't about the unknown. It was about something else. Another dimension. A dimension filled with terrifying creatures, sadistic killers, and endless horror. This was not the unknown. With this realization, Sable began to investigate other disappearances in Greenville. Before long, she realized that most of the disappearances occurred at the theater, or somewhere close by. Investigating further, she discovered the theater was built over the ruins of an old, one-room schoolhouse that had burned to the ground in the 1920s. Somehow, the students couldn't get out, and everyone perished in the flames. Feeling close to an answer, she continued her research and discovered 2 teenage brothers had recently disappeared from the theater, Elias and Elon. The only witness, their younger sister Ellen, was committed to an institution after ripping her eyes out. And so, pretending to be a relative, Sable went to talk to Ellen, who admitted she and her brothers had been trying to steal old movie posters from the storage room behind the movie screen. She then described a secret door in the basement and a passageway that led to another place. A dark place. A cold place. An evil place. "Stay away from there," she begged. "Stay away." But Sable wasn't about to stay away. Not after that story. Determined to see Michaela again, Sable hitched a ride to the theater and found the door behind the movie screen. In the darkness, she jimmied the door open with a crowbar and headed down a creaking wooden stairway to the dank cellar. A light switch activated flickering fluorescent lights that illuminated a room filled with broken theater seats and old movie posters dating back 80 years. She searched the sprawling basement and found a thick wooden door hidden behind a poster of the original Frankenstein. She pushed and shoved the door open to reveal an endless circular stairway descending into perfect darkness. Using a pen light to navigate, she descended for 10 minutes before she noticed the cold black fog rising from the lower depths. The same cold black fog that had taken Michaela. Sable considered running back up the stairs to where she would be safe, but then she thought about the terrifying creatures and the sadistic killers and the endless horror, and she quickly decided she wasn't going to let her best friend have all the fun. Killer. The unknown. Olivia's master thesis was on urban legends and their origins. She believed they all shared similarities with traditional folklore and picked one to illustrate her point. The unknown was believed to be a mysterious evil so heinous that investigating it almost immediately invited death. At least that's how the story went. And there were many stories. One story was of a woman in Greenville who disappeared without a trace on a stage in front of a room full of witnesses. Her friend disappeared weeks later while trying to investigate what happened. The police were stumped. They had no clues or leads, and that mystery created the perfect storm for amplifying and spreading an urban legend. Instead of going back home for spring break, Olivia headed to Greenville to investigate. She drove to the second cheapest motel in town and began to set up in a small room that smelled of cigarette smoke, mold, and booze. She turned one wall into a kind of evidence board. She taped up articles and various theories on similar disappearances attributed to the unknown throughout the country. She made connections with red string and yellow thumbtacks. Anyone walking into the motel room would think she had lost her mind. There were many theories as to the unknown's origin. Some said it was a malevolent entity conjured long ago by an ancient cult. Others believed it to be an alien that escaped from Area 51. Legend was that it thrived in darkness and stole the voices of those it consumed, as to lure others to their doom. The first newspaper articles Olivia found referenced a disappearance at a seance held in the 1800s. In the late 1950s, several college students mysteriously disappeared from a movie theater. Witnesses saw them go inside. Some remembered seeing them in their seats. But when the lights came up, they were gone. No one saw them leave. No trace of them was ever found. A projectionist claimed to have heard voices in the empty darkness of the theater later that night, but when he turned on the lights, no one was there. Then, in the 1960s, a group of teens disappeared while exploring an abandoned hospital believed to be haunted. Stories and speculation arose to explain these mysterious disappearances. Some talked about a top-secret government research program run by the Office of Strategic Services in the 1950s, Project Apple Pie. Mind control experiments used hallucinogenic drugs. Most of the records were destroyed in the 70s, but witnesses claimed that the experiments were performed on unsuspecting civilians in various settings and locations throughout the country, including movie theaters, hospitals, and universities. Many believed that these unethical experiments opened doorways to other dimensions, which allowed evil things to enter the world. Olivia wrote observations to pin to her evidence board. The unknown dwells in darkness and can mimic its victims. Was it an evil entity, an extraterrestrial, a failed government experiment, or just a garden variety serial killer allergic to publicity? She wanted to prove the unknown was nothing more than modern-day folklore, and that investigation led her here, to this night, to this place, to this shabby motel room. Yet she couldn't help but notice that the disappearances in Greenville included one detail the other stories didn't: the fog, and she half remembered another urban legend with a thick, unnatural fog that somehow made people disappear. Maybe, she mused, the Greenville disappearances didn't relate to the unknown, but some other darkness. For a moment, Olivia wondered what would happen if one urban legend encountered another. She laughed at the idea and tempted fate by sketching a picture of what she thought the unknown might look like. Then she pinned the sketch right in the middle of her evidence board, laughed nervously, and waited to be consumed by the unknown for having tried to define it. Anxiously, she stared at the windows and the front door for seconds that turned to minutes, and minutes that turned to hours. But nothing happened. Now it was after 2 a.m., and Olivia was exhausted as she examined the articles and sipped cold coffee. So when she first heard the whisper, she wondered if she had imagined it. It seemed to come from the bathroom. The lights in the room flickered. Who's there? Who's there? Olivia stared with wide eyes at the closed door of the bathroom. Her mind was playing tricks on her, or her friends had shown up to prank her. Ariella? Sean? Stop messing around! The lights continued to flicker as she edged closer to the bathroom. Fear spread in long waves through her, and a terrible realization bloomed within her that the unknown was behind the bathroom door, was preparing to make her pay for her hubris. Something began to whisper her name again, but then the voice rose, cracked, and distorted in sudden panic, as if the brooding creature behind the door was under attack. An unknown horror filled Olivia's heart as she left the room for nothing else. She breathed deeply as cold sweat beaded on her forehead. She placed her hand on the doorknob. The lights turned off, but she could still hear the strangely inhuman cries. Then, the lights turned back on, and she could see a strange black fog seeping through the bottom of the door. Hesitantly, Olivia creaked the door open to see a bulky shape with frenzied tentacles being pulled into a thick mass of fog, vanishing slowly into the darkness like a dying shadow. The shrieking suddenly stopped. Neighbors banged on the wall to turn down the TV, and Olivia stared intently at the black abyss that yawned before her. She wasn't sure what to do. Part of her wanted to run, but the other part of her wanted to know more. And as she considered what to do next, dozens of voices began to call out to her with promises of the unknown, and the impossible, and of unearthly things beyond human experience. And that's it for this episode of LoreDive. I thank those of you who have been watching for a long time with putting up with my erratic uploads of late. I'm actively working on going back and doing the episodes for the Dead by Daylight chapters I have missed, but I wanted to strike at this episode while the iron was hot. As for which episode is next, well, you'll just have to wait and find out. Special thanks to those of you who have been waiting for me to get back to making videos. I never intended to make a break like this, but unfortunately it was necessary at the time. I'm currently reworking my Patreon account since I haven't been able to use it the way I have wanted, and until I do, I don't think it's fair to keep charging members until I have figured out what I'm doing with it. If you would like to though, I appreciate any likes and comments that you can give this video, as it does help the algorithm pick us up. With that being said, I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. But a strange black fog had taken America.